Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Artsbeat TV and Radio. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer, and today we're slipping back in time to approximately 1942 with Mark Gionfriddo and Maureen Sullivan from the upcoming The Big Broadcast, presented by the jazz ensembles at Mount Holyoke College every year. I can't remember what edition this is, but it's up and coming in March, and Mark Gionfriddo is the creator and music director of The Big Broadcast, and Maureen is doing the promotion. And there are a lot of new changes for it this year. So first of all, good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So Mark Gionfriddo, what's new at this year's Big Broadcast?
Well, this year, just like last year, we're doing a slimmed down version of the show. The last year we called it the Little Big Broadcast, but this year we're just calling it the Big Broadcast because we're doing about a 75-minute presentation. However, it will be streamed online because right now we're, as usual, because of the pandemic, we can only allow a certain amount of people in the auditorium. And so we're going to be recording the performance live and then streaming it. So that's what's one of the first things that's new to the show. The other new thing is that we have a new MC this year. Brian Lapis has been absolutely wonderful, and he's been the MC for the last 14 years. And this year, he can't make it due to a conflict. So instead, we have the wonderful Brenda Garten, who's a former anchor at 22 News, who's also on faculty at Western New England University, who teaches in the communications department. And I'm sure your viewers will most likely recognize Brenda because she was on for many years on Channel 22, and she's absolutely wonderful and very excited to step into the role of Julie Graham.
How did you pick out the name Julie Graham for Brenda?
Well, when we did the show many, many years ago as a cabaret piece in a group I founded called Puttin' on the Ritz, this was like 1990 here in Holyoke, the first announcer's name was Bob Graham. And Ken Capurso, the former music director at WHYN-AM, played Bob Graham. And so I envisioned Julie as Bob's sister, who also got involved in radio.
That makes sense. So before we go on, when is the streaming taking place? When can people watch it?
It's going to be happening on Friday, March 11th at 7:30 p.m. And for tickets, and tickets are just $10 to go to attend the streaming. You can go to mhcjazz.ticketleap.com.
And Maureen, this is your third year, I believe, working with the Big Broadcast, because you and I worked on one of them several years ago. What's the most exciting thing about this year's Big Broadcast for you?
Well, it's exciting because I get to do all of the marketing and promotion, which of course is what I do and love to do, help Mark to get a lot of people tuning in that evening. I know when I first worked with you on it, and I was the house manager, it was the very last in-person event before the pandemic. We were just really at the beginning of it, and it was such a wonderful show. It was such a great trip back in time. I really, really enjoyed it so much, and I'm really looking forward to this year's. I think I'm going to get dressed up in 40s style and tune in.
Yeah. Boy, we really, in that show a couple of years ago, we got those performances done on a Saturday, and I guess everything closed down the following Thursday. We got in just under the wire. But the big broadcast has always been a salute to sort of the music of the big band era, and when radio it was in its golden age, and people tuned to their radios the way we watch TV. But there are no variety shows like the golden age of radio on our television anymore. I don't know about you, Maureen, but I sort of remember the Ed Sullivan show when I was a kid.
Absolutely.
Particularly because I think the first time I really remember it was when the Beatles made their debut, and but that whole era is gone. The only music variety things that we have are things like American Idol or The Voice and stuff, and that's not really what the big broadcasts were all about. Mark, what are some of the music pieces that you're working on this year? And I know that you've done commercials of the era. You want to give us a preview?
Sure. Well, we always have 4 main songs in the show that are sung by vocalists in my vocal jazz ensemble. And this year we're doing "Swonderful" by the Gershwins. We're doing "No Moon at All," which is actually, I thought it was later from the 50s, but it's actually from 1947 by Red Evans and Dave Mann. It's kind of a novelty piece, Latin cha-cha. And we're also doing I've Heard That Song Before, which was made famous by Harry James, the famous trumpeter, with Helen Forrest doing the vocals. And then the last one is "At Last," which many people will recognize as a Etta James number from the 1950s, but it's actually from 1942. And it's a beautiful ballad. We call it our mirror ball ballad that we have toward the end of the show, which kind of transforms the stage into the old Roseland Ballroom, and makes it for a very dreamlike atmosphere. Some of the commercials we're doing, and the cool thing about that is that the students actually pick the commercials. And we're going to be doing a commercial about Biz detergent. We're doing one about Tide as well, and also one on Rexall drug. I remember the old Rexall drug stores that used to be in every town.
Yeah, like the precursors to CVS.
That's correct, yeah.
Now, it's been known in previous editions of the big broadcast that you and Brian Lapis as Fred Kelly always did a buddy song. Does Brenda Garton sing?
She tells me that she does not sing, and so I'm not going to pressure her on that because there's nothing worse than being made to do something that you don't feel you should be doing. So we're going to have sparkling dialogue throughout the show like we normally do, and she's going to leave the singing to the students.
How long do the students rehearse the big broadcast? Because I know they write a lot of the commercials, and you've done sketches in previous ones that they've written. When did they start working on this, and how long do they rehearse it?
We start working on this, writing the show in January, and a couple students come forward, and they act as student producers, and I kind of show them about how you put something like this together. And so we do that for about a week's time in January, and then when the semester begins, we start rehearsing, and we basically put the show on in about 6 weeks. Now, this year is a little bit different because the college decided for the first 2 weeks, we would be remote. And so I've been working with students online on this platform, and basically teaching things. And if I'm not sure if the audience knows, the problem is that there's a time lag usually between what is said and what is heard. And so we can't rehearse all together. Everybody must leave their microphones silent. And I basically rehearse the music and everybody sings along with me, but we're not all singing along. They're a little bit, about a half a second behind me. So if we were to leave our microphones on, it would sound pretty cacophonous. So we've been doing that for the first 2 weeks of the semester. We did it, and then we went into person.
So when you guys actually live stream this, you're going to live stream it from the stage of Chapin Auditorium.
Well, yes, it will be a live recorded performance. So we're going to be doing a recording of it so that we can actually edit it for multi-camera shots and make it visually interesting for the viewer.
So, but it is going to be done in Chapin, which is the home base for it every year.
Yes, the famous Chapin Auditorium, which we found out a couple of years ago, hosted the Glenn Miller Orchestra for a senior prom. So it has a lot of good juju there, good vibes in the auditorium, and the students love performing there.
In some of the previous years, you've had alums from Mount Holyoke that were part of the big broadcast come back and perform, and a couple of them have made names for themselves in the music industry. Are you going to have any this year?
No, this year we weren't able to do that again because of the socially distancing stuff and and only be able to have Mount Holyoke community present in the auditorium. So we've put that aside for this year. The other thing that we put aside this year is the radio play. We've often, I should say every year, we do a radio play. However, sadly, my colleague Cheryl Cobb, who was our Foley artist, the person who does all of the sound effects, she passed away a few months ago. And the students and I chatted about this, and we just didn't feel it would be appropriate to do a radio play. We weren't sure who was going to be doing the sound effects. It would be very difficult for that person right away to fill Cheryl's big shoes. So we decided to hold off on that for this year, and we're going to dedicate the show in Cheryl's memory because she was a wonderful part of the show, and the audience always used to break up at her antics, and she had a wonderful sense of humor. And quite often when she was doing sound effects, if something didn't go right, that would be almost even funnier than what she was trying to do. So we're gonna, like I said, we'll dedicate the show in Cheryl's memory, and then probably next year we'll figure out how we're gonna move forward.
I certainly will miss her. I did not know that she had passed away, but her sound effects were really wonderful. And Hartford Stage earlier this year did a radio play called It's a Wonderful Life based on the holiday movie. And they had an actor as a Foley artist or sound effects person that you could actually watch doing it. And I used to be up in the balcony watching Cheryl do her sound effects, and I don't know where she learned this craft, but she had it down, and she could do all kinds of weird stuff with just basically nothing.
Yeah, she was, or she would invent it, like she would look for unusual sounding instruments to be able to try to make something sound accurate. And so we have really no sound effects in the show this year except for the Biz detergent commercial that Brenda and I are doing. And Brenda's going to read the commercial. And the commercial subtitle is Biz the Dirt Eater. And so throughout the entire commercial, there's somebody who's going like this. And so I'm going to be doing that. And again, I'm hoping Cheryl will be looking down on me and smiling because that's what she would be doing. She'd be over there doing the noise, the sound effects.
That's a very good sound effect. So if you decide to give up being a musical arranger and conductor, there may be a future for you in commercials.
She inspired me.
Maureen, yeah, Maureen, Brenda Garton said that she had a little statement for you to read.
She did. And so she was sorry that she couldn't be with us this morning, but she's teaching one of her communications classes. So she sent me this saying that she's really happy to be pinch hitting for longtime host Brian Lapis, who's been part of the big broadcast for so many years. So she said it will be a new angle to add a female voice. And as far as being Julie Graham, I'm studying the role right now and just received the script over the weekend. It's fun to think that I started my own broadcast career in radio as an announcer at 2 radio stations in Columbus, Indiana. And she wants to thank our mutual dear friend, Mark Auerbach, for introducing her to Mark Gionfriddo. She's impressed with what Mark and his students are doing at Mount Holyoke, and she's pleased to be able to share this event with her own radio students. While the journalism students in her class focus on producing news reports, this will be a great learning opportunity for them to see a different side of radio and learn what a radio broadcast entertainment program was like back in the 1940s. Both educational and entertaining, although they'll certainly be seeing their professor in a different role.
It's funny, Brenda and I did talk about that. I go into guest teaching some of her radio class, and a lot of her students are on another program here called What Young People Think. And, they think of radio as podcasts. They don't even think of radio in the way that we do, of turning on a radio in their car or at home. Some of them don't even own a radio. Which I understand. But the idea that radio is a variety thing, they don't even know what variety shows are because they never saw them on TV growing up unless they're watching old-time television. So the whole concept of a variety show and golden age of radio, particularly as they're studying radio and broadcasting, I mean, it's a real trip backwards to see where the industry came from. So I think for them, for her students and some of the others that are around the station every once in a while, this is going to be a real opportunity for them to just see what we all evolved from. I mean, I didn't listen to radio. I mean, I listened to Top 40 radio as a kid. I don't know about you, Maureen.
Oh, absolutely, all the time. I remember my first car didn't have a radio. That's how old the car was. I mean, it was an old used car. And I had to buy a converter, an FM converter, so that I could listen to music in the car. Well, maybe it had an AM radio. It must have, but no FM.
Yeah. And I mean, I grew up with a transistor radio because, we'd go outside and somebody would have a little battery radio and you'd listen to, there was one radio station. I don't know if you remember it or if you do, but it was from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and it was WOWO. And something about radio waves at night, you could hear it throughout Long Meadow and Springfield and West Springfield, and they played top 40 music. And it was the same top 40 music they played on WHYN or or WDRC or some of the local stations. But you'd be sitting around with you take your little portable radio with you and go and listen to whatever the top songs were, whether it was the Beach Boys or the Beatles. But that kind of radio is gone. You don't have that anymore.
I remember my parents and my introduction to, the golden age of radio and the wonderful music from back then. That's just classic stuff. They had an old Magnavox turntable and speakers, and they had Ella Fitzgerald and Broadway musicals and all that. And that was really my first introduction to that music. And I still have such a love and appreciation of music from that time.
Yeah, Mark, what got you interested in old-time radio? I mean, you've done all kinds of music, from accompanying club artists to jazz to classics, but what got you into the golden age of radio?
I think it was a combination of my love for big band jazz and then discovering that a lot of it occurred on radio shows, like, for instance, old transcriptions of radio programs where, like, the Camel Cavalcade, which the Benny Goodman Orchestra used to appear on, and a lot of their recordings. They would do these live recordings on the Camel Cavalcade, which were then pressed on vinyl, and so I sort of became aware of radio through that, and then also growing up listening to things like Garrison Keillor's Prairie Home Companion, and then the idea of a variety show. I really heard about it, obviously through television. And I remember as a kid, watching things like Sonny and Cher and Flip Wilson show, and then also the Christmas specials, like Bing Crosby would have a Christmas special every year. Andy Williams, Perry Como. You would get used to that every year, where they would just bring on all of these guests and everything. So I think this whole amalgam of stuff in my head just sort of crystallized, and then also there's a very wonderful musical called the 1940s Radio Hour, which I think does a similar kind of a thing. So, and then as a teaching basis for students, I thought it would really work out well. As we've been saying, the students just don't know anything about that world, and so when they connect with it, they realize how very cool it is, and to be able to participate in creating something along those lines, they get a real kick out of.
Yeah, some of the music, I mean, I think I've been to the last 10 big broadcasts, maybe longer. I can't remember, but some of the music I knew, but I didn't know where it came from, and to hear some of the interpretations. I mean, I knew who Benny Goodman was, I knew who Glenn Miller was, but like the Andrews Sisters, my introduction to the Andrews Sisters was Bette Midler singing Bugle Boy, Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, and I didn't realize what a treasure trove of music they recorded, and there's so much out there from that era.
It's true, yeah. I mean, the Andrews Sisters are definitely a mainstay of our production, because it allows my students to be able to do one-on-a-part singing. But the problem is that a lot of this stuff just does not exist in sheet music form. And so I have, over the years of doing this show, I've been transcribing all of these old arrangements so that they sound authentic. And it's wonderful to bring them back every year. I bring a couple back that we haven't done in a while. Like, for instance, this year we're doing "Bounce Me Brother" with a solid 4, which some might say is just as interesting and complicated to sing as "Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy." It just focuses on a different style of dance music. And then we're also doing "Sleepy Serenade," which is a really beautiful song that was, I believe it was featured in the Abbott and Costello movie "Hold That Ghost." And it's one of the great ballads that the Andrews Sisters did over the years.
Wow. So before we go, give one of you give us the information on how to stream the big broadcast, where to get further information, what it costs, and all of the details.
So the tickets you can get at mhcjazz.ticketleap.com, March 11th at 7:30, and tickets are just $10.
And it's one streaming only.
Yes.
Okay. Mark, is there a website or a Facebook presence for the big broadcast?
Yeah, you can also go to the Facebook Jazz Ensembles of Mount Holyoke College page. And then there's also a website connected with Mount Holyoke College that you can go to. If you just put in www.mtholyoke.com/go/jazz, that will take you to our page.
Okay, so it's the big broadcast. What year is this of the big broadcast? 17?
Yes, the 17th annual. Yeah.
17th annual, and so it'll be streamed on March 11th. We've had Maureen Sullivan from the Big Broadcast, along with the Big Broadcast creator and music director, Mark Gionfriddo, who plays Matt Morgan. And this year, Brenda Garton will be the MC. And what is her stage name this year?
Julie Graham.
Julie Graham, the cracker heiress.
That's right.
How exciting is that? Maureen, I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but I'm sure you've come up with a 1940s name for yourself, and we'll have you back on the program, and you can introduce that at some point down the road.
Oh, thank you for that idea. Now I'm going to do a little research and come up with a name. I may need your help, Mark, from Mark Gionfriddo.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
We're going to take a little break here to acknowledge our underwriters, and we'll be back with more Artsbeat. But we've been chatting with Mark Gionfriddo and Maureen Sullivan from the Big Broadcast. Put it on your calendar for March 11th. Peter Coles is our chief engineer this morning. If you've missed a part of today's program, or you want to share it with family or friends, or listen to it again, it's stored on YouTube at WSKB Community Radio. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley. With convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut, visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org. Underwriting support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Greater Westfield Chamber of Commerce, the voice of business for the Greater Westfield communities. Informing, educating, advocating, the Chamber provides opportunities for members to make meaningful connections on local, regional, and state levels. For more information on the Chamber's many events, workshops, and programs, as well as the benefits of membership, visit westfieldbiz.org. The Chamber focuses on the most important economy, yours.
This is Ken Stomsky from Ken's Den on WCPC 15 and 89.5 FM, Tuesdays, 8 to 10.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer today. Peter is broadcasting from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy. I haven't named my home studio yet, but that's where I am. And our guest for this half hour is the composer, David Crowe. Now, David Crowe may look familiar to you, or his name may look familiar to you, because there was a period of time when he lived in Springfield, and he wrote for the Springfield newspapers, and then he was the music director and conductor for the Holyoke Civic Symphony. But his career as a conductor has taken him to the orchestras of Fort Wayne and Charlotte in North Carolina. He has also been a prolific composer of music of all styles, and I've always wanted to chat with David about his music, and we've known each other for decades. So, David, it's good to see you.
It's great to see you, Mark. Thanks for inviting me.
So, you made this switch from being a music director and a conductor and an arranger to becoming a full-time composer. And how would you describe the music that you compose?
Well, it sort of evolved very. I wasn't really looking to be a composer. I was in Fort Wayne as I was the associate conductor, and there was one year there was they invited a composer in to do a project with the school children and for a young people's concert, and paid him a lot of money. And they brought him in, and he came for several sessions and worked with kids. And the piece was nothing. It was just a really dull piece. The kids didn't like working with this guy, and the musicians didn't like the piece. And I made the mistake of standing in the back of the room at one of these sessions and looking at the person who was running this program and saying, well, hell, I could do better than that. So then they called me up a couple of months later and says, okay, you're on. You'll do it next year. And that's how I got started. I worked with kids, fourth and fifth graders, on writing a piece for the orchestra that was going to be played at a young people's concert. It was a great success with children's choir, and that's how it all got started. And I started to sense that this was maybe more of my calling than conducting. I was doing well as a conductor, but I think my true voice was coming out through the composing. So it turned out within another year or so, my wife, Kathy, who you also know and had a lot to do with back in those Springfield years, got a job offer at the Charlotte Observer newspaper. So we decided to move to Charlotte. I gave up the conducting job and said, what the heck, I'll try to make it as a composer. And that's kind of how it started from there. Took a while, but...
People always ask, do you compose for yourself, or does somebody call you up and commission a work, or is it a combination of both?
Yeah, it's for the longest time until recently, everything that I composed was because someone asked me to write something for them. I had an ongoing relationship in Fort Wayne, and then when we moved to Charlotte, I did a lot of things for the symphony there, for the education program, different dance companies. I was a kind of a resident composer for a small dance company, very innovative dance company there for several years. But then moving back up to Massachusetts, even though I maintained some of those connections, that's when I started doing more things for myself. And that's pretty much what I'm doing now, since COVID really has shut down a lot of opportunities. I've just started doing things for myself and playing around and experimenting and see what comes out of it.
And you record a lot of your music as well. Did the record people come to you, or did you self-produce some of your music?
That was a self-produced disc. I have one CD that features this one ensemble that we did several of these dance programs together. We after 3 or 4 shows together, we realized we had an actual repertoire that we could put on record. So that's what we did with our with that one CD.
Were there any particular composers that influenced your style of composing? I mean, you studied music, performed, conducted. Were there, as you turned to composition, were there any people along the way that sort of influenced you or made you want to write music?
Well, there's many that I admire, for sure. And I, along the way, I find myself going into different styles. But I love the music of Lou Harrison, San Francisco composer, who's kind of, he goes back with John Cage and some of those early avant-garde composers, but he got more and more interested in Asian music, Indonesian gamelan music, and maybe even a godfather to the minimalist style of Philip Glass and John Adams, but still very melodic and a big-hearted composer who's, I just enjoy all of his music. Arvo Pärt brings in a lot more, I would say, mystical elements into his music. Estonian composer. I'm fascinated by some of the sounds that he gets from his music. Not that I write exactly the same way, but I'm very, very moved by a lot of his music.
And growing up, what made you decide to go into music? I mean, was it a concert that you went to, or did you study music as a child? What made you think, I want to do this for a career?
I just always remember being drawn to music. I started as a drummer, excuse me, And I got my first drum when I was 5 years old because I guess my parents got tired of me, banging on the pots and pans. And I studied piano very early on with an aunt who was also a concert pianist. And it was always just part of what I did. I didn't really decide to become a musician until I got into college and decided that I couldn't not do music. I think that's the way it is with a lot of people. You just can't not do it no matter what. You may be good at other things. And I was always encouraged to, get my teaching certificate and all those kinds of things. But I just had to be a musician.
And you've done a whole gamut of different kinds of performance and composing.
Yeah, yeah.
You actually wrote, you conducted, but you also were a music reviewer for a long time when the Springfield newspapers had classical music coverage in both of their papers.
Yeah. There were two newspapers in Springfield at the time, which is quite a remarkable thing, and two sets of music reviewers. I had never done any of that before, but enjoyed that immensely. And it's helped me in all kinds of ways, writing program notes and, other things. I've done some reviewing of recordings for different journals, and that was a great experience. Got me to see a lot of concerts at Tanglewood, too.
It's funny because I went back, not all that long ago, but I've been helping some of the musicians with the Springfield Symphony that form their own not-for-profit, and because there's been an ongoing labor dispute and all that. And I found a box of old playbills and old news clips because stuff wasn't necessarily online when I worked for the symphony. And I found some of your reviews of symphony concerts along with Richard Hamrick, who was the other music writer, and you talked passionately about passages of the music and backgrounds of the composers, and his reviews always had the number of the Beethoven lasted 28 minutes and 868 people.
Right.
It was like all of the reviews, whether they were music or theater, always had the number of minutes, the number of intermissions, and the number of people there.
Yeah.
So I always got a big kick out of that. And when I became a writer, a theater writer, I always thought once in a while I ought to do an homage to Richard Hamrick and say, in the course of a review, there were 8 people on stage, there were 860 people in the audience.
He was a nice fella. I enjoyed talking with him, and he always said he was a reporter, not a reviewer. And the only reason he got the job was because he was the only person in the room who could spell Tchaikovsky.
Yeah. Well, from what I understand, he's still around, not writing anymore. I mean, he's still he and my father went to school together. So Richard Hamrick would be like 102.
Oh, he's got to be. Yeah.
103.
I wish him well wherever he is.
Yeah, I do too. But when you were writing for the paper, I mean, the arts coverage that we had in our area in the media was phenomenal, and now it's really pared down to the bare essentials, if that.
Well, it's the same everywhere, unfortunately. Music reviewers, how many are left, even at the major newspapers? They're a dying breed. And to find really good music criticism is you have to really go search it out. So it really is a great loss to the community.
Going back to your composing, you've worked with dance companies, and when they ask you to compose a piece of work, do they give you kind of like an outline where we need fast music here, slow music here, we're going to have X number of dancers, and you fill in the blank as a composer? Or do you compose the piece of music and they adapt it for their ballet?
It can work both ways, and often does, in even for a whole extended piece. I will get notes, we need something that's lively and blah, 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 and has, 8 measures of this and 8 counts of that, and something that specific. And then I'll say, well, here's I'll just go digging through my files of things that I might have. And I said, well, here's this. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And he'll say, oh, yeah, that's great. I need 3.5 more minutes of it. Or it's 2 minutes too long. And, we work it from there, work it back and forth. I enjoy when the choreographer has a real sense of the music and the score and where I'm coming from. And not just thinking in terms of, well, I need 8 more measures of this in a certain tempo, and that there are musical. When I see the choreography reflecting what I wrote in the music, that's when it's really satisfying. When you see that you've done a certain gesture in the music and you see it expressed in dance. That's really where the fun part of it is for me.
How much time during the course of a day do you spend composing, or do you go through spurts where you'll sit down and compose for 12 hours on something that's in your mind and then not compose for a few days?
It's interesting. I tended to be someone who would process for maybe weeks, not have anything going on, and then sit down and then it becomes a daily thing, or spending several hours a day sometimes, particularly if there's a deadline. That kind of helps the process too. But recently, since COVID, I haven't had any. The last thing I did was just 2 years ago, and I haven't had any commissions since then. And I kind of just let things go fallow for a while. But it's just recently on New Year's Day, because I had just bought a new computer loaded with all kinds of new music software that I was trying to figure out. I just sat down and said, well, let me just try to figure out something. And I sat down, and within a little short while, I had a minute or so of music that I could transpose into MIDI and so forth. And I thought, New Year's Day, I don't make New Year's resolutions, but let me see, maybe I can write a minute of music every day. And that's what I've been doing for the last 6 weeks now. A different minute of music, different instrumentation, different styles, just to explore and to experiment. And I have to say, I'm having a great time with that, because it's not for any purpose other than to just see what happens. And I'm totally enjoying it. And it's not something I've been that regular about. I'm not a routine kind of person, but that has somehow kicked in.
When you compose, is it like people see the photographs of, or the etchings of Beethoven composing with the sheet music flying all over the piano? Do you sit at the piano and compose? Do you sit at the computer with a program and compose? And who writes down the music?
Yeah.
Do you do it manually, or do you have a program for that?
Yeah, I'm almost exclusively now at the computer. And I use Finale, which is a professional notation system. And that's what I do. I start, one note at a time, one measure at a time, and type it in. And sometimes as an antidote to that, I like to go over to a real piano, acoustic. I got a grand piano right here, and, improvise and come up with something, and then go down back to the computer and notate it and go back and forth. But it's so convenient to sit at your computer and I've got just a little MIDI controller here and all kinds of software. And that's like a playpen.
During the pandemic, when you had to sit around, did you find yourself listening to music more, or did you miss live concerts? And when did you start going back to live concerts?
We missed live concerts, and particularly live operas, immensely. There was a whole period of time where the Metropolitan Opera would have free broadcasts every day. So we followed that quite a bit. I have to tell you, last summer, the Tanglewood was going to open finally again in June, end of June. I stopped by to buy some tickets. For that first weekend, it was on a Friday morning, and the grounds were open. And as I'm buying the tickets, I hear the opening chords to the Beethoven Emperor Concerto. And there they are. They're rehearsing the manual acts. So I walked onto the ground. I'm the only person there. And I almost fell on my knees in gratitude to hear live music coming out of the shed on the Tanglewood grounds. It was almost a religious experience because it had been such a long period of not hearing live music. So since then, we've been back to the opera. We got to the Met in December. We're going again in March, crossing our fingers for 2 or 3 performances. And we've also been down to Bard College a couple of times. They do some wonderful things. Leon Botstein does some wonderful programs. So
yeah, I missed live theater. I mean, I did go the summer of 2020. I don't think I saw anything, but I started to go back and cover live theater. And there's something about sitting there in the audience and feeling the vibes coming from the stage and the audience's responses that cannot be replicated on video or tape, things like that. Although I've got to say that having all that free Metropolitan Opera programming to stream, I saw operas I never would have seen in real life. There's no way that I would have ever been able to afford to go to some of those. And exactly. I did get to live opera last year at Berkshire Opera Festival. They did Glory Denied, which is a modern opera. That you don't get to see that often, and it was worth the trip. And I thought this is great, but I would love to go to the Met. I can't remember the last time that I went to New York and saw an opera.
It's where it's at.
So is any of your work being performed in the next few months anywhere around that you're aware of?
Yes, actually. There's one piece that has been very well received, and it's part of a program I did with a storyteller, David Holt, and it's a Native American folktale with narrator and orchestra about how birds came into the world. And it's been very popular on young people's concerts and children's concerts, because I think there's not a lot of works that relate to Native American culture. So it's been very popular. And I've had 2 or 3 performances last year, and I think there's one coming up this coming week in Lawrence, Kansas, of all places, at the University of Kansas. Symphony Orchestra there is doing a performance of that. So it does get around. And a couple of other pieces that I've done, there's a couple of woodwind quintet things that every once in a while I'll get an email or something, that notification that it's being done somewhere by a amateur quartet or quintet.
Do you ever get a chance to go to some of these concerts? I mean, and see your work performed?
Usually, well, if I do, when I've done the things in Fort Wayne, I go out and conduct the performance myself. The last time I saw something where I actually went and heard a piece, I can't even recall. There was a choral piece that was done down at the Spoleto Festival a few years ago that I went to go just as the composer and sit and watch, which was nice. Don't do that very often.
When you sit and watch it, you go, wow, I really want to change that note, or I do that. And do you actually, after you see your work performed or hear it, do you go back and change it, or is once it's done, it's done?
Most of the time, once it's done, it's done. But every once in a while, I will go back and say, that really needs, there's too much doubling there, or it needs some help, and let me add a second clarinet part there, or something like that, to balance things out. It's mostly a question of balance. And sometimes I just go, oh, that just didn't work, but it'll have to stay.
Did most of your work just get performed domestically, or have some of the foreign orchestras and ensembles done your work?
I don't think so. I have a lot of things up on SoundCloud, and I know a lot of them have been downloaded. Another one of the things that Kathy and I do is we've become instructors of Tai Chi and Qigong. We learned a lot of those things down when we were in North Carolina. Now we've been teaching here for the last 10 years or so. And I wrote some music for Tai Chi to do Tai Chi by. And it's up on SoundCloud. And it's had, I think, over 50,000 downloads of people around the world who are using it to do Tai Chi. So it's not a live performance, it's not an orchestral performance, but people are moving and doing Tai Chi to my music. So, and that's all, I don't get any royalties for that, but I'm glad to put that out for people who want to use it.
Where can people find your music? If somebody's listening today and they go, I want to hear some of David Crowe's stuff. I know you have a website, but are you on social media? How would people find your music?
Okay, the website is davidcrowemusic.com. It's terribly out of date. It needs an upgrade, which that's the next project ahead of me. Also, soundcloud.com/David Crowe Music. And that's where you can find more of the recent pieces that I've done. Some of them are actual orchestral pieces. Some of them are MIDI, transcriptions. But there's a fair number of things to listen to.
When you're not listening to music, you have this, or teaching Tai Chi, you're living up in the Berkshires. What inspires you? What made you come back to the East Coast to live in the Berkshires?
Well, we always loved this area. We have some good friends here, and it was kind of a place where we always wanted to get back to. We'd find ourselves taking vacations here every year from wherever we were. And then just had the opportunity to make the move. And the thing about the Berkshires in particular is that you get this wonderful blend of nature and culture, and they kind of come together and influence each other in the most wonderful ways. I mean, Tanglewood and Jacob's Pillow are the perfect examples of that. But it's a great place for an artist to live and to get in touch with nature and to have this great access to culture that we have here. That's wonderful. And still get to New York or Boston when you have to.
Well, David Crowe, it's really been a treat to chat with you today. And we're going to end this program with a selection that you composed called It's a Wedding Dance. And you were kind enough to send the music along. And I hope you'll come join us again at some point.
Well, I certainly will. It's been great talking to you, Mark. Listen, you have to come out when the Starbucks in Lee opens up. You're going to have to come out and inaugurate it with me.
I will be out. You and I will be the two people there. I can't wait.
Okay.
And that wraps up another edition of Artsbeat. We've been chatting with the composer David Crowe. If you're interested in replaying this edition or sharing it with friends, you can find it archived on YouTube at WSKB Community Radio. Artsbeat comes to you courtesy of Westville Community Programming Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB, along with our media partners, Southwick Community Programming and Agawam Media. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer today. I'm Mark Auerbach, and we'll see you next Friday with another edition of Artsbeat.